Hello and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, the podcast for everything soilless cultivation. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, and one of my targets for this podcast is to get listeners in every single country in the world and every single state in the US. And so I'm going to target two specific states today that I think will be interested in the topic we're going to talk about, and that is, can you grow potatoes hydroponically? And I want to target obviously, Idaho, the world center for potato production, is Idaho. It's where all the potatoes for McDonald's are grown. If you don't know this, the McDonald's variety is called the Russet Burbank, not the Russell Burbank, the Russet Burbank. The russet because it has like this mottling on its skin. And so, obviously, if I've got no listeners in Idaho, then if I can't get them any listeners on potatoes, then I might as well give up. I've got an American guy who lives in my village, and he reliably informs me that one of the signs that welcomes you into Idaho says, "Great potatoes, good people." And the fact that they put the potatoes before their people says everything about Idaho. They're grown in Idaho because I think it's high elevation, so the aphids can't spread disease as well. It's the same reason why seed potatoes are grown in northern Scotland, because it's cold, it's very windy and high, and so the aphids can't spread the virus. Potatoes, what we call ware potatoes, the potatoes you eat from the supermarket, they're not grown in Scotland. It's only the seed potatoes. They're grown in England or in Belgium. Most of the French fries in Europe are actually grown in Belgium. Top fact, most of the frozen vegetables Belgium is the number one producer of frozen vegetables in Europe. And so in Scotland, potato production is classed as horticulture because it's high value, whereas in England, it's considered agriculture. That's an interesting, useless fact for you. I also want to target North Dakota because I've got no listeners in North or South Dakota, and North Dakota is the third largest potato producer in North America, behind Washington State. Interestingly, so North Dakota has got loads of potato production, but South Dakota's got zero potato production, it says. So I want to focus on those places. You might think Ireland for potatoes. Everyone thinks and associates Ireland with potatoes. But actually, they grow very few potatoes in Ireland. They eat lots of potatoes in Ireland, and it's part of their national cuisine. So they grow potatoes. And obviously, Ireland is associated with the Great Famine in the mid to late 19th century. And that was exacerbated or caused by, depending on your opinion, by potato blight, Phytophthora infestans, and it obviously led to mass problem of potatoes. This is not very hydroponics, but it is very interesting. So I'm just going to go on about it for ages because obviously the British were in Ireland and treated the Irish population very poorly, to say the least. And the Irish population, potatoes grew very well in Ireland, but it was obviously very wet. And so when the potato blight, not fungal, but the water mold disease came in, it thrived really well. And the problem was, the way the agriculture was set up in Ireland, the cereal crops were grown for the landowners, the rich English landowners. They were exported. And the general population, the Irish population, they survived on potatoes to a massive degree. Like the amount of their calories that came from potatoes was crazy high. And a lot of their alcohol production came from potatoes. And so then this disease wiped out then there was a lot of starvation and famine, and people had to emigrate from Ireland to the UK and to the US and other places around the world. And this disease also wiped out all the potatoes in England as well. So there was famine in England as well at the same time, but not to the extent. It's so dramatic that if you look at the population of Ireland, it's the only population of any country where it was higher in the 19th century than it is now, I think. It's a crazy amount of people that were lost from Ireland, and obviously the impact that has on the country in general. And Phytophthora infestans, potato blight, has had other massive effects around the world. It's thought it was one of the contributing factors to Germany losing the First World War, because they stored all their weapons in the dry potato stores, and then they stored all their potatoes in schools, basements, and places like this, and churches. And so they wiped their entire potato crop was wiped out, and so they had nothing to feed their soldiers. An army marches on its stomach, and so the Germans just starved themselves out of World War One. Now, why is that important? It shows you the importance of pest and disease control in potato cultivation, and that's why a lot of people are looking at it for hydroponics, because you can remove the soil from the system, and if you grow them indoors, then you're not having moist, wet foliage because it's not getting rained on. And if you grow a potato crop to this day, you're in the field, you're spraying the potatoes probably fortnightly in peak periods of blights, danger, with fungicides and other products that you want to prevent them from causing potato blight. So it's a massive issue. So if you can grow them hydroponically, there's a massive potential. The problem with potatoes is they're not a sexy crop. They're not an expensive crop. And so compare that to strawberries, where everyone's chasing the pound signs. They've got pound signs in their eyes. With potatoes, that's not so much the case. So there is options for potatoes. And when it comes to potatoes, a lot of people are looking at seed potato production, the expensive young potatoes that can be then used for propagation in the field, sort of hybrid system. You're not producing the edible crop, you're producing the seed production. And hydroponics lends itself well to that. You can produce seed potatoes aeroponically, so you can have a completely grown media free system. And that's good because you don't have to be messing around with the grown media. You don't have to remove a potato from a rock pool. I would imagine that would be near on impossible. And you don't need to clean the potato. And that's crucial because that's what a lot of water goes into potato production. If you could produce potatoes hydroponically, the edible type, then you would want to do it from the water side of things. And when you look on the internet and you see hydroponic potato production for edible crops, it's normally I think it's in like Asia, India, and that's where water would be limited. And that's where the real advantage of hydroponics comes in for potatoes, as well as disease control. If you think about a hydroponic system can reduce the water use by 95%. In potatoes, they use a vast amount of water in their production, but most of that water goes in preventing scab. So they just irrigate the fields to prevent this scab disease that causes an unsightly blemish on the potato. It's got nothing to do with yield. And that's one reason they use loads of water. The other reason they use loads of water is just cleaning the potatoes. They use vast amounts of water cleaning potatoes to just get the soil off them. And then when you get potatoes home, you then clean the potatoes again to get the water off. So if you can grow them hydroponically, then that would be fantastic. So 2 really good reasons to grow them hydroponically: reduction in water use and disease control. So as I say, at the moment, the only commercial systems I've seen are for seed production. And when we say seed, it's in inverted commas. They're not actually seeds. They're just young propagules of the tubers that are disease-free that you use to grow them. They're not actually seeds. They don't go from a fruit. If your potatoes actually do fruit and produce seeds, then you've grown them too long, because you should have harvested them before that. You harvest them when they flower and the tubers from down below. If you don't know, potato tubers are not a root. They're a stem. And you can tell that because they've got buds on them. Anything with buds on in a plant is a stem. And so the eyes of potato are the buds. And you can also tell it's a stem because if you put them in the light, then they go green. And that's one of the major challenges of hydroponics. Obviously, you need to keep the root system extremely free of light, not only to prevent algae growth, but in this case also to prevent the potatoes, the tubers, from going green if you want to eat them. If you get a green potato, it's going to cause you significant stomach upset, gastrointestinal problems, and they contain teratogenic compounds. So if you don't know, teratogens are compounds that mutate sperm and eggs, gametes, and so you definitely want to avoid green potatoes, green crisps, green chips if you want to have babies. In America, you call French fries, so green French fries. We call them chips, but you call crisps chips. So it all gets very confusing, but you want to avoid anything of those things if they're green. Freedom fries. Yeah, we've just bombed Iran. The French will get annoyed and we'll start calling French fries freedom fries again, won't we? So where was I? Hydroponic potatoes before I got political there. There was a fairly recent report from Norway that was published in a fairly good journal. No, not a fairly good journal, a good journal. And that showed that hydroponic potatoes, you could get 200 to 300% higher yield growing them in wood fiber than you could in field-grown potatoes. However, it was a Norwegian study. So the limit of that is that Norway is not great for agriculture. It's not a big production for agriculture. The Norwegians will admit to this. It's not one of their big boasts, having a massive agricultural system. So whether you could get 200, 300% higher yields than, say, Lincolnshire, Idaho, or Belgium, I would be interested to know how that compares. So, but they did have very good yields. The problem with hydroponic potatoes is they can become misshapen. And so, because they haven't got any medium to butt up against and things like this. So, can you produce a really good, reliable, consistent crop? And where the tuber size is ideal for what supermarkets are after, or processors. So, you will see YouTube videos of, I think it was an Indian company that were growing them for crisp production or potato chips, and they were producing these tiny. You'll see this on the YouTube video. They're producing these tiny tubers, and then they're saying that we send these off to the processor to produce potato chips, but the chips coming out of the machine were much larger than the tubers they were harvesting by hand as well. And that's another issue. If you need to harvest by hand, then potatoes is not going to be economic. The vast majority of potatoes worldwide are harvested with a machine, and so you would need to do that if you're going to produce hydroponic potatoes. There would need to be a system where you could harvest them without just by hand. But there are lots of systems now for harvesting lots of hydroponic crops with robotics. So it's not beyond the capacity of hydroponic engineers to produce a robot for potato harvesting in hydroponic systems. In California, there are a couple of companies who have looked at NFT systems, nutrient film techniques for growing hydroponic potatoes. South El Monte Hydroponics in California, they use NFT to grow seed potatoes with less disease and higher turnover. CSS Farms, again, another Californian-based operation, and they use technology derived from NASA. And NASA have looked at using hydroponics to grow potatoes because it's a stable food. The great thing about potatoes is you don't need a flower, you don't need pollination, you don't need to complete the plant's life cycle. Another great thing about potatoes from a Feed the World and Feed Astronauts perspective is that the amount of calories that go back into the propagation material is very low. And so you compare that to other tuber crops like yams. I've looked at things like Chinese yams in the past and African yams, and like 30% of the actual calories that you harvest have to go back in for the next crop. You have to put a very, very big tuber back in, and that's not good from you want to be able to harvest and grow again with not much going back in. So, like a wheat plant, it's only one seed that's going back in. And so that's good from a tuber perspective and just gross calories in perspective. And there's not much processing that goes on. You don't need to grind. And what else do you do with flour? Sort the wheat from the chaff. Potato, you can just throw it in water, a bit of washing with pure water, and then just boil it up. So you could grow that. Obviously, The Martian, on the book that became the film with Matt Damon, that was all based on potatoes, wasn't it? Lots of potatoes in that book, and they used. There, he was saying that the scientists said that you must have beneficial microbes because the potatoes wouldn't grow without them. I'm not sure how true that is. Yes, potatoes would benefit from having beneficial microbes, especially for resisting pest disease and environmental stress. But I think you could get away with growing one in Martian dust hydroponically. As long as you had hydroponic fertilizer, volcanic rock should be fine. You might need a bit of rinsing a few times and pulverizing, but it should be fine. I think one of the issues with aeroponic potatoes is that, yes, you can produce seed potatoes on the roots that dangle in the mist, but once you get to large potatoes that weigh maybe 100 grams, the potatoes will start to fall off the plant. So that's going to be one of the issues. You're going to need some sort of matrix for them to hold on to. So that's that. I talked about the russet Burbank. Said that strawberries, at the moment, strawberries are the crop that everyone's after because they are more high value. And if you can grow strawberries for Christmas, then you can make a lot of money. another interest in potatoes, though, is we talked about the water use, and if disease control, water use. Another potential big win for hydroponic potatoes is if you can biofortify the potato, then you could be big wins for the potato industry. And I don't know about in other countries, but in the UK, there's this big thing about 5 a day. You have to have 5 fruit or vegetables a day. And potatoes don't count as a fruit or a vegetable in the UK. They don't count as a vegetable because they're just considered calorific. There's no significant nutritional value. So the Department for Health don't consider a potato to be a vegetable in the sense that it contributes to your 5 a day that you need for a healthy lifestyle. But if you can increase the iron content or the zinc content of a potato or some other micronutrient or some phytoceutical, then like vitamin C and things like this, then you could potentially persuade the Department for Health that it is a vegetable. And there's been a lot of interest in this, sort of nano fertilizers. I know people who've been working on nano fertilizers at Nottingham Trent University, Gareth Cave, and they've looked at increasing the iron content of potatoes and try and get them persuaded the department that it's classed as a vegetable. So big wins for the potato industry if they can suddenly class that, because then things like jacket potatoes, roast potatoes, maybe not chips, crisp French fries and potato chips, because they're unhealthy because of the oil content that goes with them. But there's lots of potential there for the potato industry to get people eating more potatoes. And this week in the UK, there was a big news story, that's an exaggeration. You go into hortnews.com, they were saying that there's a big glut of potatoes in the UK because no one's eating potatoes anymore. We're all on pasta and rice and things like this as we diversify our diets. So they're trying to encourage people to eat more potatoes. So if we can class them as a vegetable, people will say, oh, let's eat some healthy potatoes. Let's see. One of the problems of researching hydroponic potatoes is there's lots of websites that claim that potatoes are grown hydroponically commercially, but I doubt whether they actually are. I think it's mainly these sort of seed potatoes, small potatoes. I don't know of anyone producing ware potatoes or processing potatoes that for on a large scale hydroponically. I just don't think it's there. I think I would have seen this happening, would have seen machinery that's designed for it. And I can't see it happening anytime soon because of the price of them. If it does happen, I think what will happen is that it won't be like really large potatoes. It'll be what we call in the UK new potatoes, the young, small potatoes that you put in a potato salad, or Jersey potatoes, we call them as well. They're seasonal. And if you could grow new potatoes or Jersey potatoes for Christmas, or salad potatoes for Christmas, then that's going to be your most expensive. It's going to be the Range Rover of the potatoes. Your baking potatoes, your roasting potatoes, these are not going to be the ones that are going to be grown hydroponically first, or if ever. I just think they're going to be the ones. And then maybe things like, maybe there's a black potato, really dark purple pigmented potato that you could grow hydroponically that you couldn't grow in the field, or struggles to grow in the field. If you speak to a potato breeder, there might be one that really they'd love to commercialize, but they can't, and because it doesn't grow well, then maybe that's the sort of thing that you could choose. Rather than saying we want to grow hydroponically potatoes, which one should we grow? Maybe speak to the breeder first and say, what can't you grow in the field? That would be what I would do, rather than that way round. Might be there's some sort of GM superfood potato or something like that's really valuable, and so you don't want to risk putting it into the field. Other things with potatoes is they can get viruses, so if you can keep the aphids, the green fly, out, there's another reason to grow them in protected environments and protect them from viral diseases. Obviously, if you're keeping them indoors, you're going to protect them from blight. If you get potato blight indoors, you've done something seriously wrong, because the foliage should be dry and you should be able to control the humidity. If you haven't done that, then you shouldn't be growing potatoes hydroponically. As I say, I've tried it before in the past to try and grow the world's largest potato with disastrous consequences, because I just produced 600 tiny little potatoes rather than one giant one. So I'm no one to talk when it comes to optimizing hydroponic potatoes. I'm more than happy to be steered. If you know somebody who's growing hydroponically potatoes, or especially anyone commercially, I'd love to hear about it and do a follow-up episode on it. As I said, there are a lot of companies doing seed potatoes. An interesting one is a company in Finland, and they're growing one in an abandoned metal mine. I'm assuming that's metal ore. And the website is absolutely bonkers. The Finnish town is unpronounceable. It's got lots of umlauts and things like that in it, so I'm not going to even attempt it. The mine is at a depth of 1,444 meters. 1,400. Is that right? Is that right? That's bonkers. How do you get the potatoes up from that depth? It must cost a fortune to get the seed potatoes up from that depth. But yeah, they're planning it. It must be very warm down there. That's going to say. I guess that's why they're growing them. There's no aphids down there. You can get a stable environment, I suppose, and they'll grow well under the controlled conditions. At that depth, the temperature of the mine is between 18 and 20 degrees C, so it's geothermal, and they're going to use LED lights. That's mad. You would need a lot of bunker busting bombs to stop that farm from producing seed potatoes, because bunker busters is what they go down to 600. We all know now. Now the US has attacked Iran. They go down to 60 to 100 meters, and this one is at least 14 times, maybe 20 times that depth. That is crazy. So yeah, I just don't think it just seems bonkers that. I mean, we have in the UK, we had a company called, was it Growing Underground? Something like that. My mind's gone. And that was growing in underground, abandoned railway, underground tube lines. That doesn't exist anymore. And I guess there just wasn't the capacity, or just didn't make feasible sense to grow in the underground system. Who knows why that company failed? I have no idea.